Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be with you today. And I also want to thank Kelsa and also Mary. There is a lot of behind the scenes that goes on that I didn't even know about. And I'm so grateful for all of their assistance and their help with this. All right, so let's see if my screen will move. Okay. Do you see three icons, the good, the bad, the ugly? No, we're really not talking about the ugly today, but we are on this Packed with Stress today going to talk about the good. We're going to talk about the bad, and we're going to talk about 6 support strategies. So these are really our objectives and our path forward today. So let's dive into the good. What I'd like you to do throughout this session, I'm going to have you working on Menti, answering some questions. There's just a few slides interspersed throughout the presentation, and I would love you to get on your phone and take a picture of our QR code, or you can just do it on your device in front of you, whatever that is, but I'll give you a couple minutes to get on menti.com. Okay, looks like we've got a few joining us there. So I want to ask you the first question. What is good about stress? You can type a phrase, you can type just one word, but what is good about stress?
I don't know. Is anybody else having trouble? Oh, okay. I can.
There we go. There we go. Okay.
I'm having trouble, I think, connecting or something to Mentimeter. So, okay. I'm glad other people can.
Give it another go. Do you see the code up at the top? All right, so we've got stress can be motivating. It can give you energy. It really can be an alert system, right? And it can keep us safe. A lot of people saying motivating, that's why that word is getting a little bit bigger. Helps us to accomplish things, right? All right, all of those are good things. So there can be some good with stress. And I would like you to see an actual bell curve of what good stress looks like. Just need to move some of my stuff out of the way here. There we go. Stress can be a positive motivator, and many of you mentioned that word. It can be motivating. It can get us off the couch. It can push us to clean our house. It can help us get to work because of stress. And you can see where that optimal stress is right in the middle. So you've got your green and your yellow stripes here is our optimal stress level, where we're actually functioning really, really well. We can be creative, we can be focused, we can be productive, and that word that you, so many of you came up with, motivated as well. But too little stress, that's on our left side in the purple. Too little stress keeps us from reaching our potential. And in this area, symptoms of too little stress could be we're super laid back, and it's okay to be laid back at certain times and relax at certain times, but not if we have to accomplish something, right? We could seem bored. We could just be plain inactive. When we have low stress, those are the times where, like, I want to be on vacation in low stress. I want to be with family in low stress. Those kinds of things could be happening with low stress. And if we have too much stress, then we're on the orange and pink side, and we can really get overwhelmed, right? And stress can harm our health, actually physically and mentally. But the good news is that it's okay to have an optimal amount of stress, and an optimal amount of stress is good for us. So let's go into the bad. Now, stress, I want you to look at the chart on the left, just in the blue right now. The cause of stress is, it could be short term, and it could just be a one-time thing or a project that needs to be done, any kind of recognized threat, of course, but it's usually short term. And the thing that I have in the symptoms down here below, the ones that are in the red box, these are the ones we probably see a lot of as faculty. We probably see these with our learners, maybe even with ourselves, that there might be some irritability or anger. There might be general unhappiness, or learners are overwhelmed. So those are the things I see a lot with learners. But you can also see, and I've got the arrows here, from stress to anxiety, there are some symptoms that are the same. So we really need to be careful, because unmanaged stress can turn into chronic stress if it's not going away. If that level of optimal stress is not going away and it starts to become high stress and it's all the time, anxiety is what it can turn into. And anxiety lingers, and it may not even have an identifiable trigger, which can be really scary too with anxiety, because it's not something that somebody can turn off very easily. So that's why we need to worry about stress, is that unmanaged, it can turn into chronic stress, and it can turn into anxiety. Now, the next thing that can happen is unmanaged anxiety can then turn into depression, and depression can turn into self-harm and or suicide. And you can see in the middle, between anxiety and depression, some things that could go either way. So some restlessness, that might be somebody who has anxiety, but it could also be somebody who has depression. Social withdrawal, we may see that with some of our learners, and they may have anxiety, or they could have depression. But again, if we do not manage the anxiety, it can turn into depression. And then depression is where people can physically or mentally hurt themselves. And that's what we don't want with learners. So this is the bad news about too much stress. So we can see here, stress can lead to anxiety, anxiety can lead to depression, and depression really is an illness, and it does affect our brain. And in extreme cases, we can see that it causes, like I said, with mental and physical harm that can happen, and factors contributing to depression. Stress is one of those. Now, we also have other, difficult circumstances or changes in chemistry level or hormone level, but stress is one of those factors. So I would like you to meet a student. I want you to meet Alex. He is a junior at ASU. He is in industrial design. Now, this is a very difficult program to get into, but he loves it. And it did take him a couple of years to figure out what he wanted to do. It's got heavy homework. There's difficult projects with industrial design. Now, this is his 6th year of undergrad. Now, think about that. He's a junior and sixth year of undergrad because he had gotten his AA and then he was doing some other things before he actually got into the program. He was working on school along the way, but then once he got into industrial design, he had to start his 4-year bachelor's over from the beginning. He does work 25 to 30 hours a week. He loves his job. It has something to do with what he's doing in school, with industrial design, and the company actually loves him. They would love to have him full time. His wife works part-time in the evenings or on the weekends when Alex can be at home watching the kids, just so they can make a little extra money. Both parents have very heavy church responsibilities and family responsibilities. So here's Alex. Now, on your device, I'd like you to answer what overarching feelings could Alex have each day? Just what you know about Alex right now, just those few bullet points about Alex. Obviously, there could be a lot of things going on with Alex, but just put a few words in there. What you think he could, what kind of feelings could he be having on a daily basis? Okay, lots of responsibilities, overwhelmed, fulfilled, good. He could feel some stress. He could feel stretched, maybe a little stretched too thin. He could feel anxious, fatigue. Okay. He could even start feeling some burnout, right? If that stress and anxiety might not be managed, some burnout might come into play. You bet. So I want you to think about these things that have happened just this week with Alex. Their 6-month-old, their baby got very sick. They had several doctor's visits, lots of medicine, and their little one actually ended up in the hospital just a few days ago with RSV. There's always a parent with him because they can't bear to leave him alone. So they have been tag teaming back and forth, figuring out how to make sure there's always an adult, always a parent with him so that he's not any more scared than he already is. So somebody mentioned tiredness, right? Well, now there's no sleep has gone through the roof. They're thinking about medical bills because now he's in the hospital for a few days, and there's all that time away from work as well. Not to mention all of the school work that Alex has still got to do. Now, what is Alex thinking? What do you think he wants to do? What do you think would be his go-to? Now that they have had not necessarily traumatic experience, but a little bit of trauma, if that makes sense. Something that has come up that isn't super fun that they've had to deal with. So now what do you think Alex is thinking? You could answer either one of these questions or both. What do you think he wants to do? He wants to quit school. He wants to drop out of school. Probably that school is the easiest thing to do because he needs to make money. Isn't the easiest thing to do, right? Despair and withdrawal from others. He wants to take a break. He wants to quit school and will work full time. Well, I will tell you, Alex is my son-in-law, and that little baby is my grandbaby, and his mama is my daughter. And Alex does want to go to school. And he has said it out loud to his wife. He's said it out loud to me. He does need a support system, and he has a really, really good one. But all of these things you're saying about school, and taking a break and going to work full time so that they can have the money they need to take care of the medical bills. These are all the things that are coming up in Alex's mind right now, and he has said it out loud. Now, just to give you a little update, as of yesterday, that this little guy is on the mend. He is not on oxygen anymore, so that is really good news. After being on oxygen for 3 days, we're hoping that he's going to be home soon. But this is the takeaway from this I want you to think about as faculty members. These are real situations facing our undergrad and our graduate students all the time. Now, some are easier situations that they're facing, but some are even more difficult. A death in the family, their own illness. There's a lot going on in undergrad and graduate students' lives. And every single one of these situations, whether they're easier than this or about the same, or whether they're more difficult, all of these situations come with a level of stress. So just keep that in mind as we're talking about some things that we might be able to do as faculty. Now, what can't faculty do for learners? We can't do students' assignments. We can't carry learners' load for them. We can't take the stress away completely, right? What can faculty do? There are things that we can do to help ease some of the stress and pressure as we support students in the learning environment. And it's our responsibility as faculty to learn these support strategies. Now, there could be a lot of different strategies than the 6 that I'm going to talk about today, but these are the ones that I find work the best for me and that I've seen work the best for other faculty around me. And these support strategies can even help us as well. So now we're going to dive into the 6 support strategies. Number 1, faculty need to have clear expectations for learners. And with each of these 6 strategies, I'm going to talk about the why. Why do we need clear expectations? And I'm going to talk about the how. How can we give clear expectations? So we're going to talk about why and how with each one of these. So let's go on to the why. I want you to just take a minute and look at this picture very carefully. I hope you're all laughing. I know you're on mute, so I can't hear you, but I hope you are all laughing. This is at a school that I pass every single day on my way to work. Right here in Phoenix, there is a school that has these 2 signs in the same spot every time I pass, where cars are coming in and out of. So are they supposed to enter or are they not supposed to enter? Very muddied expectations. There is not a clear way of moving forward at this point when you look at this picture. Clear expectations are really going to provide that scaffolding that students need for success. It's going to show them the path forward. You might even show them expectations that are at the very end of a course or at the end of the class. And that's okay too. If you're showing them the end point, you're showing them the path forward. And it gives that structure that they need to their learning. The other thing that clear expectations do is it builds trust between faculty and learner, because they trust that you are going to do what you say you're going to do because that's what you told them to expect. So that's super important. And if learners are confused, they get overwhelmed and they really just want to give up. So when faculty has explicit expectations, students are more able to meet their learning goals. So these are some of the whys of why we need to have clear expectations from the beginning. And what would that look like? How do we have expectations? How do you show what you're going to expect? Well, you might provide a rubric or criteria of how something will be assessed. You might design assessments that connect to real world situations. So problems that they might be dealing with, something in context that they might be dealing with right now, but something that they can relate to. This is a super important one. I love this one, is providing formative feedback. So something specific, actionable, and timely. You don't always have to grade these formative assessments, but along the way, they can see how they're stacking up with your structure and your expectations because you're giving them some feedback. Doesn't make sense to give them a lot of feedback and in a way that is just the end. Because then if they're not going to do anything with it, or make something better or turn it into something that you would expect, then the feedback isn't going to do much good. So the feedback needs to be formative, it needs to be timely, and you need to be letting them know this is really what I expect because maybe this project wasn't what I expect, but giving them a chance to make that better. Also, providing models of high quality student work would be really important so that they can kind of see, oh, this is what you're expecting and this is what I would like it to look like. Now, obviously, if you are having them do something creative, something new, something that hasn't been seen before, your expectations just need to be clear about what you are expecting, and you wouldn't need to show them a model, obviously. All right, so let's go on to number 2, reflection. I want you to think in your mind, you don't have to answer this out loud. I want you to think in your mind, how many of you share a reflection at the beginning of your class or the beginning of a meeting or the beginning of your course? And I know some of you are teaching online, and so a reflection obviously would look very different. You don't have a start and end time all the time. How many of you provide a reflection? So let's talk about the why. Well, first and foremost, we are a Catholic Jesuit university. So reflection should be natural for us. It should be a natural part of what we do and what we share. Our Jesuit values really encourage the importance of compassion, relationship building, reflection, and humility in our work. And this statement right here, our Jesuit values encourage, that statement is in almost every single outline of each college or each school. So like the School of Medicine, the School of Dentistry, the College of Education, they have a statement that is very, very similar to this in their beginning introduction or their overview of their courses. So it's got to be pretty important. And Ignatius of Loyola really taught others through reflection. And what he was really doing was teaching them how to really attune themselves with God's activity and the things that God is involved in everyday circumstances. So making those connections between deity and ourselves and our own lives is how Ignatius did it. When we share a reflection at the beginning, it could be time to connect with students on a more personal level. So that could be super important. We're trying to build rapport, and it helps ground students to the present and what you're about to do. It also creates that trust between faculty and learners. So that's super important as well to keep that going. So let's talk about the how with a reflection. Start with a reflection. How do we do that? It might be a poem. It might be a scripture. It might be a simple prayer. It might be breathing techniques. I love this simple sign of breathe in, pretend you're smelling a flower, and then you're letting it go. You're breathing out, pretend that you're blowing a leaf, And it's just a simple way to remind us that we want to be here, we want to be present, whether we're online or whether we are in person. Either way, we want those students with us. We want them to engage in the material, engage in the discussion. So breathing is just a great way to start. You could have them breathe for just 30 seconds and then give a reflection. And that could be short as well. You want to keep the reflections short. You want to keep them simple. You could even ask students to provide their reflection. And it shouldn't feel stressful, like, oh my gosh, I forgot my reflection today. It could just be as simple as today, to just help us ground ourselves and to be present. We're just going to breathe for 30 seconds and then we're going to start our material. So don't make it stressful for you or for the students, but just a way to come together. All right, our third one is using stories and humor in our teaching and in our material as well. So why do we want to use stories? Well, there have been many, many studies about storytelling and using stories in curriculum in higher education that, and the results they found are that retention is higher. It can increase learners' self-motivation. It can even increase attendance because then they don't feel bored. They don't feel like I'm not going to hear anything new, but they're going to maybe hear a story. They could even hear a story from other students. It doesn't always have to be from faculty. But these things on the left are the things that are working with storytelling in higher education. It helps with positive social emotional learning environment. So it's really building that rapport with faculty and student or from student to student, which is also super important in the learning environment when you're in person or when you are having them do things online and they're doing discussion posts or things where they're interacting with each other. Super important to have that positive learning environment. Also, it increases their learning interest. So it may fan out some material that you have brought to light, but then they want to look into something else. They're interested in learning about something else because of the story that was told. And of course, it reduces stress and anxiety. And they have found all of this to be true with storytelling and using some humor. Now, there was a workshop that was done recently, and it's called Storytelling in Higher Education, and it was done by University of Phoenix. And what they did is they provided a workshop, several series of classes to faculty at University of Phoenix about storytelling techniques. And one of the things they found is that not just the faculty, but also the learners had more empathy for other people, not just people in the classroom, but for people outside of the learning environment. They could relate to them a little more by hearing a story that might be about a certain type of people or a certain type of situation, and that empathy increased. So that was super important. Also, a community of inquiry was organically built. They didn't have to worry about which questions am I going to ask? Are they going to be high level enough? The inquiry was already happening because from a story, there could be questions asked that could help them dive into other materials. So that was important as well. The other thing that faculty saw is that they saw the depth and breadth of all the different faculty experience. So when faculty is telling a story, maybe about their own personal life or about something that they've been involved in, they know that really well. They know the story well. They can tell it to other people. And the University of Phoenix department that the faculty training department found that their faculty was much more diverse than they had imagined because of the stories that they were telling. And they had lots of great expertise that they could rely on. And it also highlighted, as they told stories, it highlighted career relevance for the learners. So they were happy to hear of other stories that maybe could help them in a career down the road. So let's talk about the how. You could teach a whole course as a narrative arc, and really help learners connect the dots from class to class to class. So maybe they have 8 weeks of classes, and in that 8 weeks of time, you start at the beginning with just a little piece of the story. And then the next class, you tell a little bit more of the story. And then you do some work with that story. But then the next class, you tell a little bit more about the story, a little bit more. So there is this arc of storytelling that is happening throughout the entire course. That is one way that you can do it. And there's been some research on that, that it helps students with that retention, and it helps students want to learn more, that interest in learning that we just talked about. By telling a story from beginning to end, all the way through the course. And obviously, you don't want it to be a story that is just flippant or doesn't make sense for the material that you're doing. You want it to relate to the material that you're teaching. And that's why a nice narrative arc could be really helpful throughout an entire course, because they're making more and more connections and connecting the dots throughout the entire course. Now, I want you to look at this comic. Just read that to yourself. This is one of my favorite comics to use with resident physicians, because as we talk to them about being good teachers and residents as teachers, it's super important to remember that even though people may have a certain learning style, it's also super important to remember that we need to go wide on the learning style. But this would be a fun way to let students know you are not going to only learn things visually. You might be a visual learner, but you're not only going to learn things visually in this class, you're going to go wide because you have a lot of capability and you have a lot of ability in a lot of different areas in our learning style areas. So that it's just a fun one to show students at the beginning of the year, for sure, or the beginning of their class. Now, you could tell lighthearted personal examples, and these could just be short. They don't have to go from beginning of the course to the end of the course. They could just be something at the beginning of class to highlight some important points, or throughout the class. You could tell a joke or ask students for jokes to start class, but you do want to remember, with all the storytelling, with all the jokes, with all the comics, with all the images you may show them, you want to keep it appropriate. You want to keep it clean. All right. You don't want to be going down the road of Title IX and having to deal with any of that. So you want to keep it appropriate. You want to keep it clean, and that storytelling and humor can really have something to do with the class. It doesn't have to just be a random story. Obviously, you want it to make a connection to that. All right. Number 4 is flexibility. Why should we be flexible as faculty? You can write a phrase, you can write a word, whatever you'd like. Why should we be flexible? Life is hard. We're all human. We are modeling. I love that. Flexibility is actually easier than being rigid. It increases student learning to be flexible, helps with diversity, helps us to meet learners where they're at. That is super important. I love that. And we have different learners with us, right? And it shows that we care. And that's going to be one of the things we dive into in just a little bit. To learn from others. Life happens, right? So my next screen is because we have Alex in our classes, right? We have things that are happening within the personal lives of learners. So flexibility is super important. And now I want you to think about how. Now it's your turn to answer, how are you being flexible? Or how could you be flexible with your learners? What could you offer them with some flexibility? Here's some options for deadline. We can't do that all the time, but it's definitely a flexibility measure, right? Extensions or alternative deadlines, a little bit of extra time. And it would really require the communication with a learner that something's even going on, right? It would require Alex to make sure that he's connected with all of his teachers and all of his courses at this time, for him to be able to take advantage of some flexibility, because you're not going to just give flexibility just because, right? So discussion of adjusted timelines of assignments, flexible deadlines again, individual meetings with students. You got somebody says, I try not to have any one assignment make or break a grade. So I love that with flexibility. So small amounts of some extra credit here and there that they can pick up. I love that because that really does help offset when life does happen, right? Let's see. I don't know if it'll let me scroll up. Oh, those are all the ones that we have. Great. Okay. Talk to or observe students before the start of class to find relatable points, right, for flexibility. So what flexibility does require of us, that we already have a relationship or we already have made some kind of connection through our reflections or through other measures with stories and humor, that we've already got a connection with our learners. It's hard to be flexible if you don't know the person, or if you don't know what's going on, or if your learner is afraid to come talk to you. How can you offer that flexibility if they are then afraid to come tell you about something going on in their life? So making sure you're making those connections with learners from the get-go, and then being able to be flexible is a lot easier because you know them. Excellent. All right, so some of you mentioned compassion and taking care of others, because we care was one of your answers. And so we're going to talk about compassion a little bit. So number 5 is compassion. Here are a few thoughts about the why of compassion. So compassion is really part of our mission here at Creighton. So when we are compassionate, we are mission driven. Now, this mission, these mission statements here, this on the second bullet point, is from Division of Student Life. And I have linked that for you right there so that you can get to that link later. But it actually says, guided by our Catholic Jesuit values and in support of the Creighton University mission, the Division of Student Life provides programs and services enhancing student experiences. In partnership with the campus, we foster holistic student development in the Ignatian tradition to produce students engaged in their communities with compassion, confidence, and character. So those are the kind of learners that we want to produce. So we have to have some compassion in ourselves as well. So I think compassion goes really well with flexibility. If you're flexible, you tend to be a compassionate person. You want to be able to help the learner work things out. when they've got a lot of stress and a lot of pressure in their life. I love this quote. I use it on one of my, not on my Creighton email, but one of my personal emails as my signature line. Ralph Waldo Emerson is one of my favorites. And I actually went to Emerson Elementary, who was named after him. And so did my father and all of his siblings and all of my siblings. And now my own kids are going there. And next year, our oldest grandchild will be going to Emerson Elementary in Mesa. And so I love this quote. I feel like I have a little connection with Emerson anyway, but I love the purpose of life is not to be happy, but to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. Now, you might be saying that, well, we are supposed to be happy and God would want us to be happy and our family wants us to be happy, and that is true. But I find that when I'm living well and I'm being compassionate with other people and I am being honorable and useful, that's what makes me happy. And that's what brings joy to me. I don't go out seeking to find joy or to find happiness, but I seek to be compassionate first. And I can do that with my learners, not just with people that are really close to me or my immediate family, but I can do that with people outside of my immediacy. So we need to be able to do that with learners as well. When we are compassionate, we are also strengthening this connection that we have between faculty and learner, and that's super important too. So how are you compassionate? Might be in a clinical setting, might be in a classroom setting, might be outside, off campus, but in your learning environments, how are you compassionate? How can we be compassionate? Whoops, this one, you don't have to write it in there, but if we could, if anybody wants to unmute, that would be awesome, to share some things that you do that are compassionate with your learners, or you can put it in the chat as well. Sorry about that. I forgot to hook that one up to the Menti.
It's Erica, Jessica. I can talk about something that happened yesterday.
Hi, Erica. Thank you.
Yeah, I had a student who just seemed like super distracted, was like putting his head down on his desk and looking at his phone, even when other students were presenting. And I was super frustrated. My first instinct was to like not be kind and compassionate about it. But on his way out the door, I said, "Hey, I'm just checking if you're okay." And he's like, "Yeah," and kept walking. And so then I circled back to text and say, "Hey, you really didn't seem okay." And he's like, "I just beat myself up over presentations. And I'm just, thank you so much for checking back." And so like, I was glad that I went against my first instinct, right? Which was, it's hard to presume good intent all the time, but I tried to. And so definitely, I think the relationship grew with the student because of that.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Kirby. Also in the chat, we have listening to students and having patience. So important things for compassion, right? Any others?
Hi, this is Colette. I mean, the only thing I'll add, and maybe I'm stating the obvious, but you know, to be able to carve time out to meet with students one-on-one, it's challenging when you have a lot of students, but it can give you the opportunity to better understand where they're coming from, and it fosters the relationship building that you're referring to. And so whenever possible, you know, and I'm in student affairs, but I teach as well, and it really does make a difference.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Colette. Super important to have that one-on-one, right? And we can't do that all the time when we've got to be 100 students in one course, but we can offer that time to them if they're needing to come in and talk to us. You bet. Very good. Okay, so we're to number 6, and I want you to think about all 5 that I have just mentioned that we have talked about. Okay, these are things that faculty can do. We're not now going in and saying to learners, well, you could be really flexible, and this is how you could be flexible. We're saying, this is how I can be flexible with my learners so that I have a better relationship with them, so that more learning is going on, all of those things. So these are things that we can do. These are changes that we can make. Telling stories and using humor and adding a reflection, making sure that we have time for all of those things, super important within our classes. And now this number 6, the last one, is our resources. They are going to be links. We're not going to talk a lot about them because you can offer them as faculty. If Dr. Kirby found out later that this student needed a little bit more support that maybe she wasn't going to be able to offer, or another student was going to be able to offer, she could then pass on some of these resources to him. So these are places that learners can go to get a little more help with stress, with anxiety, with depression. And when you get the slide presentation, these are all linked to their contact pages and the information pages that you could just pass on to learners as well. But we've got the student counseling services right there in Omaha, on Omaha campus. And here in Phoenix, we have 2 psychologists. One is new, so I don't have her link, Lisa Donster, but they work right next door to each other, just down the hall from me. But there is a link to Kia Watkins' contact page. And then also here in Phoenix, we have the Community Standards and Wellbeing Office, and Rosie McSweeney runs that. And these can also be of help to our learners, whether we're in Phoenix or whether we are in Omaha. So we went straight to the how, because obviously the why of resources would be that maybe we don't have everything that this learner needs to be able to keep them going, or to reduce that stress or anxiety that they may have. So in order to support them, we can share resources with them. So I went straight to the how on this one. The other thing about the how that Creighton sets up is what kind of time frame this might look like for students, so that you could actually share this with them. And it goes all the way up to an off-campus referral, but it just starts with a very simple screening. And then there's supports along the way, along each stair step. Creighton offers these kinds of support. And you can actually see this, and they talk more about them on the link that I shared with you on the slide right before. I love this quote by Dr. Dean Ornish, and he says, health, wellness, and peace are things we already have inside of us. We don't have to get them. We have to stop disturbing them. And we as faculty can help learners stop disturbing this wellness and stop disturbing the peace by supporting them when they are feeling overstressed, overwhelmed, when they're feeling anxiety, or maybe even as far as depression. We can help them by supporting them. Any questions for me? You're welcome to unmute as well if you have something to share that works really well for you. It doesn't have to be a question, it could be a comment, it could be something that you have been able to do with learners to build that trust and connection. while you're thinking about that, or maybe typing or thinking about what you might be able to say, I do have my contact information here. And the QR code takes you to my academic success website, so that you can see the different things that I can do to help GME learners, resident learners, but also with faculty.
Jessica, one thing, this is Colette, one thing I'll share, and again, this is not, I don't think, a novel idea by any means, but at the beginning of the semester, at the beginning of class, I have students fill out a form, and it just gives them an opportunity to kind of introduce themselves. I ask them questions such as, you know, your preferred pronouns. Is there anything that you can share with me that would help me as an instructor of you in this class? You know, and I ask things like, you know, what motivated you to enter the profession of dentistry? So it's just, you know, it's just a way. And then of course I review them, and I put some of their comments with their name and contact information. I make myself a little directory with their photos, and that helps me get to know them a little bit faster, because there's 115 in the class. So that has been an investment of time on the front of the course, but it's really helpful moving forward.
But I think just, Colette, you asking the question of them, asking some questions of them, helps them feel seen, helps them feel heard, and then they know you're going to be able to make a connection with them as well. And if you're putting their picture on their card, then you're also able to say their name out loud when you see them after practice, I'm sure, because I know it's a lot of students, but good ideas. Anybody else? We have such good faculty at Creighton, just overall. My son is graduating in December from Creighton there in Omaha. And I think that has been his biggest takeaway, is that the faculty has just been so phenomenal. It really has helped him to, with that career connection, that he wants to be a professor in Spanish and Hispanic studies, and he is just thrilled about the education he's received because of faculty. And I know that so many of his faculty have used flexibility and compassion and storytelling to really bring things to life for him as well. So thank you for all you do.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. And thank you again, Jessica, for presenting on this important topic. And thank you, everyone, for attending the program as well for your professional development. So we'll give you a few minutes back, and have a great Thursday. Thank you again. Bye-bye.